Shalom. Thank you very much for coming, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Rabbi, for a very generous introduction. I don't know how I'm going to fill up 15 minutes. After all, the burden of proof is not with me. But I can probably make a... That is going to take some time, making the case. But I think I can probably make a fist of it. I prefer to argue, and I do in my book, that the belief in a supreme being or a creator is actually a pernicious belief that does great moral and intellectual damage to our poorly evolved primate species. And I'm hoping that we will, in the course of this evening, get to the point about the ill effect of religion, but I'm not going to duck the obligation imposed upon me by the motion before us, which is to give the reasons why we're so lucky as to be furnished with so little evidence for such a horrible proposition. And falsity, after all, is a subdivision of perniciousness. Religion, however, does stand, having started in that pejorative manner, does in a way stand to our credit. We are, after all, imperfectly evolved primate mammals though we are, and aware of our kinship with other such creatures. We do have the gift of pattern seeking in our minds, and we will pursue this gift, often at our own expense, but at great hazard and often with great ingenuity. That has a plus side and a minus side. It very often means, you'll have observed it in your own lives and those of others, that we prefer a junk explanation to no explanation at all, or a conspiracy theory to no theory. And religion takes its place in our evolution in this precise manner. It's the first and worst explanation we came up with. It's the best we could do when we didn't know we lived on a cooling planet with big fissures in its crust. When we didn't know there were microorganisms that had power over us, we didn't have dominion over them. To the contrary. When we didn't know we lived on a spherical planet, we didn't know we revolved around other spherical bodies, everything was terrifying, new, mysterious, and often lethal. It was our first attempt at philosophy in that way, first attempt at cosmology, first attempt at geography, biology, all the rest of it. A hopeless attempt belonging to the bawling, fearful, ignorant childhood of our species, but very necessary. And it possesses still the advantage of having come first. The terrible advantage over the mind and over learning that it possesses is its originality. And the history of human emancipation is the struggle to get away from this terrifying, foolish, ignorant first try. And I can see we have still some distance to travel, but we have made a start. Now, you can argue it because it's still here. We know a little bit, of course. We don't now think that the Aztecs were really on to something. We don't think that all faith-based is better than none. We don't think you need to wrench a living heart out of a chest cavity to make the sun come up every day. We've been through the list of gods. It's in my edited collection, The Portable Atheist. Mencken actually drew up a list of very nearly 10,000 gods that used to be worshipped and aren't anymore. As my friend Richard Dawkins says, everyone's an atheist. Nobody believes in the sun god Ra anymore. Nobody believes in Huitzilopochtli anymore. Nobody believes in Juno and Venus anymore. You're all atheists as far as that's concerned, and you look with pity on those who support or ever did such cults. All we say is, make it consistent. Just go one god more, and you're nearly there. Peter de Vries puts it... Peter de Vries, who, poor guy, brilliant novelist and great essayist, who, poor guy, was brought up Dutch Reformed in Illinois, says in his wonderful discussion of religion, Slouching Towards Kalamazoo, it's called, I recommend it, people used to be polytheistic. They believed in many, many, many gods. Then, for some reason, they decided to narrow it down to one. They're getting nearer to the true figure all the time. This is the struggle I want to invite you to join, ladies and gentlemen. The easiest way, I think, to clear your mind of such remaining illusions as you may possess or labor under is the following. The great words of Laplace, the first person to develop what's called the orrery, a model of how the cosmos and the universe would look as if it was viewed for the first time from the outside, the circulation of the heavenly bodies and the planets. And he showed it to the Emperor Napoleon, who wanted to know how this great genius, the only rival to Newton in his time, Laplace, had managed this, and he demonstrated to the emperor how it worked, and the emperor said, but there's no God in this machine. And Laplace says, well, it works very well, Your Highness, without that assumption. Not just science, but our own other reflections have told us that there is nothing remaining to be explained that could only be explained by the existence of a supreme being, creator, or first cause. The universe and our lives, too, all operate exactly as you would expect them to if there was no such thing. Why does the delusion persist? Well, we might get to that. I think it has a lot to do with wish thinking, and not wishing only for desirable things either, such as the survival of death, but also wishing for things that are less desirable, such as the triumph of ourselves over others, with God on our side, having made a special covenant with, say, just one tribe in Bronze Age Palestine. The most reactionary idea probably ever invented by the religious. But you'll see analogies of it everywhere God is discussed. Or the need for a terrifying supreme dictator. Nietzsche is said to have said that God is dead. Freud is said to have said that God is dad. Others clearly believe that we would be better off. In fact, we wouldn't have any ideas of our own if we couldn't submit to a celestial totalitarianism, a final, unanswerable authority in the heavens. This is wish thinking, but of a very unpleasant kind. It shows again how poorly we have evolved ourselves from the fearful primate and mammalian species that first crawled out of the mire. Now, there are global and cosmic versions of this. I have time, I think, for a few minutes remaining, to deal with them both. Start with the cosmic. Why not? There are I think it's 4,000 billion observable galaxies now. Anyone who claims to know a lot about all of these has sources of information denied to me, but we know a little bit about them and a lot more than we used to do. And Edwin Hubble noticed rather famously a few decades ago that they're all moving away from each other rather rapidly. It's what they call the red light problem or observation. Very rapidly indeed, in fact. Now, this has very important implications because it was thought until 9 years ago that because of gravitational factors, that rate of expansion would surely by now be slowing. They'd still be expanding, moving away from each other fast, but less fast all the time. No, the rate is going up. The speed is increasing. Lawrence Krauss has a wonderful piece in the upcoming Scientific American on this absolutely crucial point. It means that within measurable time, there will be no signs left in the observable universe that the Big Bang ever occurred at all. Everything will have disappeared out of sight. There will be no markers, nothing to take observations from. I mention this because it's often said that how can something come out of nothing? It's the clever question every religious demagogue and businessman always begins by asking you. Well, we know we've got a bit of something in this universe, and we know nothingness is coming. So, some design, huh? Nothingness is not just innate, programmed, it's the next big thing. And we at least had some somethingness. As if to make assurance doubly sure, the Andromeda Galaxy is headed directly in collision course with our own. Measurably, it's already filling. The sky can be seen with the naked eye. In 5 billion years, which is to say fucking soon, ladies and gentlemen, it's on us. And if it hasn't happened before then, our sun goes into a red giant, then a red dwarf. We become a crisp. That'll be nothingness programmed instead of somethingness. Some design, huh? Well, let's move then, while you ponder that, to the tiny suburb in which we actually do know we live, this little corner, just our solar system. Every other rock in our solar system is completely inhospitable to life, either too hot or too cold, as is most of our planet, which, as we know, have good cause to know, is on a knife edge of climatic survival as we speak. We could become extinct at any moment. In fact, when we still lived on the savanna of Africa, the environment to which we were adapted and have fled, but where we still betray the scars of our lowly origin by the coat of fur we grow in the womb and then shed, by the appendix, by our terrible dentition, and by many other things. Our adrenal glands are too big, our prefrontal lobes are too small. We're not the finest primates that could have evolved. It's estimated by the people who've done the DNA work on this that we were down as a species to less than a few thousand because of climatic events and other nightmares and catastrophes before the decision was made to abandon the savanna and seek cooler territory, we could very easily have joined the 99.9% of every other species that has ever been in existence on this tiny planet and become extinct. That close. What are we flattering ourselves about? What is so great about our anthropic principle that we should attribute this to a design or a designer? Some design, huh? And some designer too. Who but a serf wants it to be true? Who but someone who doesn't like to do their own thinking wants or needs this to be true in the face of all, not just some, but all of the available evidence before us? I've put it like this. It's the only hypothesis of my own that I've ever come up with. It's a version of, on this point anyway, it's a version of Joseph Schumpeter's hypothesis about creative destruction as the energy of capitalism. In order to believe in, not in a deistic God, in other words, a creator, a first cause, an imponderable starter, which of course only leads you to an infinite regression, because how could there be a starter who wasn't himself started or herself begun? Who created the God? Who made the creator? Who invented the inventor? Who designed the designer? Any fool can see the fallacy peering right over the shoulder of this hypothesis. But suppose that's not just a theistic question, but a deistic question, but a theistic one. A God who answers prayers, a God who intervenes, a God who didn't just start this, but cares how it winds up, who cares what you do to your private parts or to those of your children and insists on their being mutilated, who knows what you should eat and what day of the week, who knows with which gender you may or may not recreate yourself or be recreational with, and so forth. The deist has all their work still ahead of them to prove that there is such a being. Here's what you'd have to believe to be a theist. I've already shown the absurdity of deism, I hope. To be a theist, you'd have to believe this. How long do you think, ladies and gentlemen, I have 3 minutes, shan't, I hope, need them all. How long do you think the human species, as a distinct Homo sapiens, has been on the planet? Anyone want to shout a guess? Okay. Well, Richard Dawkins thinks 250,000 years, 250,000. That's considered to be on the high end. Francis Collins, who's become a friend of mine, a very, very devout Christian, who, as you will know, sequenced the Human Genome Project and did the final report on the full-out discovery of that unravelment which showed us our kinship with other creatures and indeed with other non-creatures, other forms of vegetation and junk that's in our, undoubtedly proves us to be part of the creational soup. He thinks minimum 100,000. He's not quite sure if it's 250,000. All right, I only need 100,000. 100,000 years since we dared to became separate from the Cro-Magnons and the Neanderthals as our own species, Homo sapiens. Here's what you have to believe to be a theist. For 100,000 years, humanity is born. Perhaps 25% of it dies in childbirth or very shortly afterwards. Life expectancy, 25 for a very long time. Infant mortality, extraordinary, after childbirth deaths, Killed by microorganisms we didn't know existed, by earthquakes that we thought were portents, by storms that we didn't know came from our climate system, by other events that arise from being born onto a cooling planet with deep cracks in its crust, faults in its crust. Then man-made things, turf wars, fights over women, fights over territory, over food, and so on. Very, very slow, gradual, exponential upward progress, we might like to think. Pretty slow, but at least we can claim, out of our own self-respect, man-made. And for the first 96,000 years of this experience, heaven watches with folded arms. Us go through this with indifference, without pity. And then around 4,000 years ago decides, gee, it's time to intervene. And the best way of doing that would probably be in Bronze Age Middle East, making appearances to stupefied, illiterate peasants, which could later be passed on. The news would get to China after about 1,000 years after that. 2 minutes. That's what you have to believe. Aren't you glad you can't be made to believe that? Aren't you glad there's no theocracy anymore within range of you that can make you believe that? Do you know what it's like living in countries where you can be made to believe it? Do you know what the penalties are for not believing it? They're just exactly congruent with the stupidity of the belief itself. We would be better off, ladies and gentlemen, if we grew out of it. We would be better off if we'd grown out of it a long time ago. I've only had 15 minutes to show its falsity. The rest of the evening, I hope, can be devoted to its wickedness. But the falsity is part of the wickedness too, and thanks for hearing me out. Thank you.